The latest device from Retroid is the Retroid Pocket Flip. It takes the hardware and software from the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus and puts it into a clamshell form factor. When I first got the Flip, I did an unboxing and first impressions. But at that time, I was a bit torn if the Flip felt like it was a worthwhile pickup. But now, after having more hands-on time with the Retroid Pocket Flip, I wanted to circle back and collect my thoughts. We're going to get into the details of my experience with the Retroid Pocket Flip. We'll dive into the hardware, software, and gameplay experience to help you decide if this clamshell handheld is the device for you. So get subscribed and let's get to it. The Retroid Pocket Flip has the same great specs that can be found in the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. That includes an 8-core Unisoc Tiger T618 processor, 4GB of RAM, 128GB of internal storage, a 4.7-inch touchscreen with a resolution of 750 by 1334, and a 5000 mAh battery. The Flip is available starting at $159 for the black, 16-bit, and indigo colors. If you're interested in the transparent red, which they call watermelon on their site, that will run you $164. Design-wise, we've got a clamshell device similar to the Nintendo DS, with the exception of the double screen. When you open up the device, it feels like it should have notches so you can choose the angle, but there is just a fully opened or fully closed state. When gaming, I kind of end up compensating for the viewing angle, and I end up tilting the whole device, which for me made it a lot less ergonomic than it could have been. The carrying case for the Flip is sold separately, and in my first impressions I thought it was so strange that the case is just simply too large for the Flip. It turns out that the foam that is inside the case is meant to stay there if you don't have the grip holder. This does make the carrying case at least a bit more useful, but I'm really not a fan of having to leave this foam in the case at all times. It feels like it's Retroid basically saying, hey, the grip is a better experience, which in that case they should have just included the grip or built the grip into the design of the device. I picked up both the transparent red and the limited edition sport red models. Both are really sleek, but the sport red is definitely the one that I gravitated towards. The shiny plastic and the vibrant red really makes the Flip stand out, but the transparency of the other style is pretty cool too. When it comes to the controller on the Flip, we've got the standard set of buttons. The D-pad is a rubber membrane, which compared to the Retroid Pocket 3's is micro switches. Comparing the two, I actually personally prefer the micro switches found on the Retroid Pocket 3. The Flip's D-pad just feels a little stiff, but this is definitely more of a nitpick. As far as usage, the D-pad never registers an incorrect button press, and you can't accidentally hit left or right when you're hitting down, which is a problem I see in a lot of these emulation handhelds. The ABXY buttons are also rubber membrane and feel great. They are not stiff feeling like the D-pad at all, and because the plastic is slightly recessed, you can't accidentally push the buttons down too far, which is great. There are also two analog nubs, similar to the left analog stick on the 3DS. They are very flat against the device and require some force to move around because there is some resistance on the analog stick itself. A big surprise to me actually was that these analog sticks support L3 and R3 clicks. And then finally on the front of the device, we've got a start and select button. Both are non-offensive and feel totally fine. Moving to the top of the device, we've got a few exciting new features from Retroid. First is the analog triggers. That's right, analog triggers. They feel fantastic with a good range of motion. The L1 and R1 are nothing new, but they also feel really great to press down on from any area on the button. The second new feature are two macro buttons. Retroid doesn't offer any out-of-the-box programmability, but they are registered as unique buttons, which means you can remap them either at the system level or at the emulator level. Also at the top of the device is a USB-C port and a micro HDMI out. The right side of the Flip has a volume rocker, and the left side of the device has the micro SD card slot. I previously complained about this being an insanely hard micro SD card slot to remove from the device. That complaint still applies, but I have come to recognize that in reality, you don't really need to remove the SD card very often at all. The bottom of the device has the power button on the far left and a headphone port on the far right. The back of the device has an area for the fans and the active cooling, as well as a speaker grill. The speaker location seems a bit off-putting, since there's clearly enough room on the front to have front-firing speakers. That being said, the sound quality is adequate. When it's max volume, it does feel like the sound is clipping a little bit, but just turn it down a little and it's loud enough for personal use. Of course, that is until you turn on the active cooling option to performance mode. It's great that Retroid has active cooling as a new feature for Retroid devices, but man is it loud and far from perfect. I had to turn the volume to 100% to mostly drown it out. Anything less than that, there's a high-pitched sound from the fan. But when the fan option is set to balanced, the fan is not nearly as audible. You can still hear it if you're listening for it, but it's much more tolerable. Besides the hardware of the Flip, we're also treated to the same high-quality software from Retroid that we've been seeing on the last few iterations of the Retroid Pocket. From the setup wizard that's still unrivaled, to a great front-end launcher that gets you right into gaming, the software experience is definitely what we've come to expect and appreciate from Retroid. One feature that really brings the software and hardware experience together here is a built-in detection for when the Flip is opened or closed. When the Flip is unlocked and in use, if you close the clamshell, it will actually automatically put the device into sleep mode. If you open the Flip a few moments later, it will automatically turn the screen back on. The auto on feature only functions for a few minutes after you close the device though. If you let the device sleep for too long, you will have to use the power button to wake the Flip. One thing I've noticed is that the gamepad tester that's included doesn't recognize the R2 button as an analog trigger, but it detects the L2 just fine. To really figure out if this was a hardware issue or not though, I downloaded a different gamepad tester app, and that one does show that both analog triggers are fully detected with their full analog inputs. One of the stranger decisions that Retroid made here was to not include physical home or back buttons like you would normally find on Android devices. For me, this was kind of a big deal because I just really didn't enjoy using the touchscreen on the Flip, considering the device is more bottom heavy than top heavy. While there's nothing built in to fix this, I picked up an app in the Google Play Store called Button Mapper. For a $5 in-app purchase, you can actually remap any button on the device to any other action. While you could choose to use the macro buttons for emulator functionality and map it to something else there, I found a lot more value in reducing the need to use the touchscreen and map the left macro button to back and the right macro button to home. This completely resolves a huge complaint of mine with this device, but I wish this was something built into Retroid settings instead of me having to go out and spend another additional $5 on another app. Hold up, you angry commenters. Looks like before I even had a chance to complain, Retroid pushed a firmware update and we've actually got more nuanced controls over the back macro buttons. And yes, you can even set them to home and back. I'm keeping the previous stuff in there because I do think the Button Mapper app is pretty cool and it could be useful on other Android devices. Okay, moving on to the gameplay experience. The chipset that the Flip has is one that we've been seeing for quite a while now, so we already know all about its performance. Here, we're going to focus on the gameplay experience as a whole, and this is where I was really conflicted in my first impressions. After spending a decent amount of time with this as my primary gaming device, my main conclusion is that I just wasn't drawn into the Flip. When I test new devices, I make them my main device and really focus on getting a fully immersed experience. But with the Flip, I just dreaded playing it after a few days. Playing games with the analog sticks was really just not a fun experience for me. The way my hands have to stretch around the device is just very uncomfortable, and the stiffness of the analog sticks make the gaming experience less than ideal. Because of the analog triggers, this should have been a great experience for GameCube and Game Pass games. The Dolphin emulator even allows you to map analog triggers, so games like Super Mario Sunshine will play just as expected. It's really just those analog sticks that kill the experience for me. When I did pick up the Flip to game though, I did actually just find myself enjoying D-pad-centric games a lot more. Upscaled PlayStation 1 games like Crash Bandicoot is a fun experience, even with the D-pad, at least for a short gameplay session. But overall, I found the ergonomics of the device really just not enjoyable at all. I was finding that I was literally having hand cramps after just 10 minutes of gameplay, at least for something like a platforming or action game. The Flip has a great screen though, so every game is super vibrant looking and high resolution. Super Nintendo games are fun for a bit as well. Widescreen Super Mario World is good if you're okay to sacrifice some quality for the widescreen patch. Game Boy Advance also looks great on this device, with minimal pillar boxes on the left and right of the screen. PlayStation Portable is another one that I gave using the analog sticks another try, but nothing could change my mind. Performance-wise, PSP is great though. Considering the device is clearly based on the Nintendo DS clamshell design, it felt like a requirement to play some DS here. The gameplay itself again is just fine, and you can use the D-pad for all of the games, but it just doesn't feel right to have to position both the top and bottom screen on one screen in this case. Even though having a bottom screen would be zero value for any other system, I would actually love to see one of these companies actually attempt a truly dual-screen Android device. Despite Retroid creating high-quality experiences with their last several iterations of their handhelds, the Flip is really just not for me. I didn't find any major issues with the device or anything. It's just a bunch of little nitpicks that when you add them up, it's just not a good gaming experience for me. There are some great new features that are introduced with this iteration from Retroid though. Active cooling to prevent throttling for more CPU-intensive games is a great addition, if the fan didn't have a high-pitched whine to it. Analog triggers is becoming a must-have as these devices become better for GameCube emulation, Game Pass, and PC game streaming. I hope Retroid does stick with analog triggers on their future handheld iterations, and I also hope that it becomes a more standard thing to see in these emulation handhelds overall. Extra programmable buttons are always a nice to have, but because the Flip doesn't already have a home and back button, I had to buy an app to let me program these extra buttons to standard Android features. This kind of negates the fact that these buttons exist at all. While Retroid continues their trend here of absolutely fantastic looking screens with super vibrant colors, because the device is bottom heavy, using the touchscreen itself on the Flip is kind of annoying, and I often was finding that I was tapping in wrong spots. It felt like it might have been a calibration issue, but I'm pretty sure it's just the angle that you're using the Flip. I like that the clamshell design keeps the screen protected when you're not using it. I also think it's great that the device automatically goes to sleep when you close the lid. I do wish the Flip would always turn back on when you flip it back open, not just for a few minutes after you close it the first time. I definitely recognize that there may be some people out there that love this device's design or really value the analog triggers, but for me, the Flip was a drag to have to pick up and play. If you're looking for something within this price point, I still recommend the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. Retroid just released the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus with a metal shell variation, and I'm pretty excited to get that one shipped out and do a full review on that one too, but it does come with a higher price tag of $180. But anyway, let me know what you think of the Flip. Do you think the additional features are game-changing enough to pick one up? Are you waiting for a different emulation handheld? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed for future videos. You can also follow me on Twitch, where I stream from time to time and we look at more emulation handhelds and play some games over there. And thanks for watching.